All right, welcome back to the Daily Exchange. Guys, we're here and we're with Tim Draper. He is the founder of Draper Associates, DFJ, and Draper University. We're talking all about Bitcoin, DeFi, and the decentralized technology. We'll see you guys right after this. All right, guys, we're back. We're here with Tim. Tim, welcome to the Daily Exchange.
Great. Thanks for having me, Tobias, and really excited to be back on the show because our first one was such a big hit. We need 1 million views. So you guys, that's the goal. We've got a bar. We got to hit 1 million views. So whatever we say here, spread the word.
Tim, I think you might have first got me confused with our cameraman Tobias. My name's Fred, but I should introduce myself. Just
Smart. Oh, it said Tobias. Hey, Tobias, good to have you here.
We got Tobias with us.
Good to be here.
All right, let's get into it. Tim, there's a DeFi explosion right now. Some people are calling it the fourth industrial revolution. What do you make of this DeFi space and what's happening here?
So I'm trying to figure out what the first three were, but I guess the first one was the Industrial Revolution. And then there was probably the internet. And then there was probably Bitcoin. And now the fourth one's probably DeFi. That makes perfect sense. Internet opened the world, and all of a sudden we were all global. We went from being this tribal world where borders were protecting us from each other to this global world where we realized that we could help each other. And the internet opened that all up. Well, Bitcoin made it so that now we had a currency that we could all use globally that was frictionless and cross-border and open and transparent and global and all that. Well, DeFi is really just step two. I mean, first there's Bitcoin, and you can use it as a store of value. You can use it to send money cross-border, micropayments, that kind of thing. But then people are saying, well, I've got all this Bitcoin. What do I do with it? How do I put it to work the way I put my dollars or my yen or my pesos to work? How do I put that to work? And that's the beginning of DeFi, where they're saying, well, look, you can loan it to people and people can borrow it and put it to work and pay you interest on it, just the way you do with other currencies. So mostly DeFi so far is borrowing and loaning, but it also includes all sorts of new forms of derivatives and all kinds of interesting things. So what DeFi's really done is taken this currency and opened it up to all the things that we use fiat currencies to. And so now we have this great DeFi technology that is moving us forward. And then I think then it's ReFi. It's the retail world is going to open up. And that's when right now it's only 1 in 14 Bitcoin wallets that's owned by a woman. But as soon as retail, which is 80% of all retail shopping is done by women, as soon as that opens up, this is going to be really extraordinary. So it starts with Bitcoin, it moves to DeFi, and then it goes to ReFi, where the retailer is accepting Bitcoin because they save the 2.5% to 4% that they normally pay to the banks, and that can be passed on to the customer. And so the customer realizes that this is a better way, using this is a better way of shopping than using a credit card. So I think that we are, this is stage 2. Stage 3 is going to open up the floodgates. And that's really stage 3 is where I made the prediction of $250,000 per Bitcoin. And then once we're at stage 3, we are wide open. the world is now going to use this currency, and it's going to be using it globally, and we're all going to be so much better off. And this this retro to tribalism, where like these some governments, the bad ones, are going, oh, we need to put borders up or trade war or whatever. They're going to lose out to the ones who are going, hey, we're open, we're free, we're transparent, bring it in, we'll use Bitcoin. Bitcoin will be a national currency, and here we go.
Awesome. I also just want to compliment you firstly as well, Tim, today on your Bitcoin tie. Thank you for bringing that to the show. That's just awesome.
Of course. And better than that, I've got this.
That's worth the bell. Yeah. So I want to talk about, so there's a recent stat right now, currently around $2 billion of wrapped Bitcoin is on Ethereum. There's currently about $40 million of Bitcoin in sidechains such as Liquid and the Lightning Network. And there's also another trend going on right now where we've seen for the last, for the longest historical time in Bitcoin's history, its price being above $10,000. And also the amount of Bitcoin being held on exchanges has decreased and now sits on personal wallets as opposed to exchange addresses. Now, there's some pretty strong undercurrents for DeFi and its base back into Bitcoin. My question, Tim, to you is, do you think DeFi will be bigger than Bitcoin?
Yes, I think so. I think the reason that people are moving their Bitcoin off exchanges and into wallets, there are two. One is that, sure, you can lend and do interesting things with, but I think the other one had to do with COVID, because they shut down all of the businesses, and then they realized that they had to keep people alive, so they printed $13 trillion, and that's in dollars. That's in fiat dollars. Well, that makes the dollar worth about 20% less, naturally, because there are only $86 trillion out there. Well, now there are 100 trillion. And that makes Bitcoin worth more relative to the dollar, and it makes it a better store of value. And so people are, instead of leaving it in the exchanges and moving in and out of it like trading Bitcoin, they are using it as a currency. They're using it as a store of value, and then they're using that store of value and they're loaning it out in the form of either wallets or Tezos or whatever, where they do baking and staking, and there's a coupon on the money. And so, yeah, I believe that is what's happened. And the other thing is, I think people stuck in place are looking around for something new to do, and they're getting themselves a Bitcoin wallet. Hey, might as well try this thing. And so that's kind of an opening things up. And also, some people are custodying for the first time, where they're actually storing in Coinbase or other place their coins, so that they can sleep easier at night rather than holding them in some safe or holding them in their ledgers. So all that is changing, and it was interesting the way you asked that question. You led me toward the answer, and I like that, because it kind of made me think about what is happening with people, and why are they taking their money out of the exchanges, where they're making all these quick trades about Bitcoin's at this price, I want to go to this price, instead they're saying, I'm thinking in terms of being an investor, and I'm taking that money and I'm investing it, so I'm getting a coupon on that investment. Long term, here's what I want. I want to be able to take Bitcoin as a venture investor I want my investors to give me Bitcoin for me to invest in a bunch of startups. And I invested in Bitcoin, and I want those startups to pay their employees and suppliers in Bitcoin. And I want the whole chain there on the blockchain, on smart contracts, so that when a sale is made, the smart contract sends the money to the right place. When a company is sold, all my investors get their money straight into their wallets. I'm okay with like the government taking a tax at that point, and building this whole thing on the blockchain where they keep perfect records. So let me kind of explain why I'm excited about this. I don't have to pay a bookkeeper, an accountant, an auditor, any of that, because everything's taken care of on the blockchain as long as the software is built for financial statements and cash flow statements and what else. And the smart contract keeps perfect records so that I don't have to pay a transfer agent and a lawyer to just figure out who gets what in my of my investors. So I am really looking forward to taking DeFi, which is really loan-based now, where investors are lending and borrowing, to the point where we're really putting the money to work and we're taking Bitcoin and investing directly into companies. Now, the reason I can't do that now is it's a triple accounting cost. I've done it before, I've tried it. It turns out that the accountant makes you translate it to, first you pay taxes if you gained anything on the Bitcoin. Then the accountant makes you account for it first in Bitcoin, then in dollars, then back in Bitcoin, and then back in dollars. So I paid about 3 times the amount to my accountant just to do it in Bitcoin, which is ridiculous because, hey, we got the blockchain, we don't even need the accountant. So I'm feeling like the future, we're going to go from this DeFi world to one that's super DeFi with where investors can take it, invest in companies, trade Bitcoin for shares, and then go to ReFi where Bitcoin is just a currency where you can send it wherever you want. Already, Bitcoin's so much easier to use than dollars, because if I needed to send you money right now, I could just go to my Coinbase account and just go here. And if my alternative is call the bank, ask them to wire money to your account, you have to give them account numbers. You have to give them all the account numbers you have to that you have in your bank. And then you've got to say, oh yeah, it arrived and all that stuff. I can just send it to you. It'll show up in your wallet and we're done. So I actually think longer term, ReFi at retail is where this is all going to really happen.
Tim, in terms of, there's a lot of these new DeFi projects out there and all sorts of different exchanges and applications coming out. From a venture perspective, I know we talked about last time in our previous catch up that your favorite column and category was the other category, which I think all of our watchers and our community here really loved, and they've been thinking about that a lot, and there's been a lot of discussion about that. But when it comes to DeFi, are you placing that in the other category? And I guess does this catch your eye? Is this part of your thesis from a venture perspective?
Yeah, and let me describe the other category in greater detail, where I say, okay, a certain amount's going to go after healthcare, and a certain amount's going to go after finance, and a certain amount's going to go after gov tech and whatever. And then I say other, because I never know what an entrepreneur could potentially be bringing me. And this fund it's 4 years of investment and 10 years of life. During those 4 years, a lot can happen. And during that time, in fact, I should have more than a quarter of the fund dedicated to other, because anything can happen. Okay, that said, is DeFi part of other? Actually, no, because a big part of DeFi comes from fintech, which is a very large section in our investment thesis, where we saw finance changing early. I was lucky. I invested in Robinhood, Carta, AngelList, Bitcoin, and a number of others that are all going after sort of this fintech window. And I would say that DeFi is in that fintech window, although some of DeFi is very exciting, where it's a little bit more de-gov. It's a little more government tech or insure tech or real estate tech. It's pretty fascinating what can be changed with these new decentralized technologies. The Aragon guys are doing a new form of jury. And so they're creating a way for us to have a jury of peers that, and they use token economy to create that jury. And it can be more of an effective jury than any other jury out there. And they're trying it with simple, small claims, but it's going to be bigger and bigger and bigger. And eventually it will be the equivalent of a liquid democracy where I give you my vote for one issue, and I give my vote to Tobias for another issue, and then you guys then give your votes, and eventually it comes to some real vote where the consensus is that we go in this direction or that direction. That's really powerful, and that can all come through Aragon, through the ANT token. I also think that something interesting is happening in insurance, where right now you could create an insurance. I mean, when you do insurance, when you buy insurance, you pay your premium, you pay your premium, you pay your premium, and then you have a claim. And then they fight you on that claim. And they send lawyers after you and inspectors and whatever else. And then finally they go, okay, well, here, we'll pay you a little bit something on your claim. And that's how they make their money. They collect easily and they pay very slowly and painfully. Well, I think the consumer is really going to enjoy this new way of insuring, which is you put it on a smart contract, and that smart contract is tied to certain events. And so you are paying your premiums on the smart contract. And then when that event happens, when somebody dies or there's a car crash or whatever, it is instantaneous and you get paid. And the claims inspector can be surveillance. They can say, yeah, we actually have a drone that flew over that area and they saw that your house burned down. So here's the money, done. And so as an insurance customer, I'll be going, oh my God, I got to do that. That's way better. And when you have a tragedy, you want that payment right away and you don't want to have to fight with the insurance company. And so that's a whole new form of insurance. But if you take that a little further, you realize that about 80% of what government does is insurance. It's healthcare insurance, it's workman's comp insurance, it's welfare insurance, it's your unemployment insurance. It's all those insurance programs all lumped together. Well, if I can put all those insurance programs on the blockchain with some smart contracts and have people pay in Bitcoin to participate, I can actually change the whole nature of government. I don't actually need a physical location for a government. I can do this up in space or 11 miles offshore, and I can provide you better government service than you're getting today. And you add the surveillance part and you've got the cameras and all that, you can actually provide the defense too. So it's pretty interesting what could happen to government. And who is my government? I spend about half my life in other countries. Well, I did until COVID, and in plenty of other states. Why is it that I'm paying California and the United States and my local town county? Why am I paying them taxes when a lot of my taxes should be spread to other places? And then why are we allowing them to have lines at the DMV and all these fights about whether you get a mail-in ballot or a in-person ballot when we could all do our ballots on a smartphone and we'd be much more secure and everybody would feel good about how the vote comes out? Why am I doing it that way when governance is a big part of governance, if not all of governance, will be decentralized? And that's kind of a mind-blowing thought that gets people thinking, wait, what? We're going to have a change, and that change is going to be an anthropological leap. You talked about the 4 industrial revolutions. I actually think we're going to have an anthropological leap from being tribal to global. And these politicians are saying things like, we need a trade barrier here or a trade war here or a border here. They are sort of the roar of the dying lion, because the lion, he's the king of the forest, and then all of a sudden he's getting weaker and weaker and weaker, and finally, just before he dies, there's a big roar. Well, that's what we've done, and that's with this COVID lockdown. By the way, worst policy decision in the history of the world, to lock down to try to keep the disease away. That alone is apparently, according to the UN, going to kill 135 million people from starvation. We're all interconnected. We're a part of a supply chain. If I have a farm and you have a house and we don't do a deal, we're the only 2 people around, and we don't do a deal, then you die of starvation and I die of exposure. Now you multiply that by 8 billion people. We're all interconnected. Your pen comes from 50 different people that all got together. They might be in 12 different countries. Your computer probably came from 50 different countries and touched 100,000 different people. We are all interconnected. We're all a part of this great world economy. And the power of that free market just keeps getting more valuable. Well, if all of a sudden you lock it down, or you say nobody can travel, or you say, here's our border, nobody cross it, or we're going to have a trade war with China, whatever, those are all bad decisions that shoot you in the foot. Whereas if you say, hey, we're an open economy, come on in, all of a sudden, all the best and the brightest are going to come to you. When China said Bitcoin's illegal, Japan said Bitcoin's going to be our national currency, or one of them. There was a brain drain out of China that was unprecedented, and one that went into Japan that was also unprecedented. That's because all these governments are starting to realize that they have to compete for us. They have to provide great service, or we will leave. And those governments that are still trying to be the roar of the dying lion, controlling everything in an economy that's global and decentralized, are missing the whole boat. And this retraction to socialism is the stupidest thing I can think of. I mean, maybe people just don't know what socialism is, but socialism is North Korea. Capitalism is South Korea. Okay, North Korea, people are starving. Average person makes $100 a year. South Korea, average person makes $46,000 a year. It's been going on for about 3 generations, this break in Korea. The average South Korean is 4 inches taller than the average North Korean. Where do you want to be? You want to be in the free market economy. You want to be a part of capitalism. You want to be a part of this interlocked group of people who are all doing business with each other, who are all trading with each other. And the way to get there is with these, I mean, now we've got the internet, and now we've got a way of doing business across borders. There's no stopping us. We have Bitcoin, we have this open, transparent, global, wonderful world, and the tribal world is going away. And this is such an exciting time. As a venture investor, I loved the internet. I loved what it did. Everything was great. This is so much bigger. This is the anthropological leap. And we're going to be on a major tidal wave.
Tim, you talked about last time, your $250,000 price target, 2023. Now, I think you also mentioned the coronavirus, obviously, and the printing of quite a large amount of U.S. Treasury funds, and that's a phenomenon I'm not sure we've seen in history as well. I think, and it obviously it plays very, very strongly into the thesis and of Bitcoin. I wanted to ask, would you actually increase or decrease your prediction?
I can move it forward a little bit because my prediction was 2020, end of 2022, beginning of 2023. It's kind of in that range. And what I was counting on is where everybody starts using Bitcoin for retail, and then it becomes at least 5% of the world in world currency. But you hit on another point. You said it's unprecedented that anybody's ever printed $13 trillion. But when you go to Argentina, you realize they're printing money like crazy there because they're deeply in debt and they're trying to pay that debt in Argentinian pesos. I had a bet I tried to make with President Macri. I told him about Bitcoin about 4 years ago. And then 2 years ago, and when it was at about 10,000, it just hit 10,000. And then about 2 years later, I came and I met with him again. And I said, that Bitcoin I told you about, it's now down to about 4,000. And he goes, yeah, I heard. And I said, yeah, but during that time, the Argentinian pesos dropped from 75 cents to 25 cents. And I said, so I'll make you a bet that if the Argentinian peso outdoes Bitcoin, then I'll double my investment in Argentina. But if Bitcoin does better than the Argentinian peso, you'll make Bitcoin a national currency like Japan did. And he looked at me and he goes, well, I don't know. We may have to do another devaluation. He was hedging. He didn't really bet. So he got thrown out of office. It's been about a year since then. He's been thrown out of office. And the Argentinian peso has gone from 25 cents at that point, 75 to 25, to less than 1 penny. And they have just been printing money like crazy, and they're trying to make the dollar illegal, and they're doing everything they can to try to put it together. But the Argentinians don't trust it. They don't have the trust in their currency. And so the people who are trying to build something of long-term value are using Bitcoin. So yeah, it's unprecedented in the US to print 20% more currency in one fell swoop, but it's not unprecedented around the world. And what it does is it creates inflation, and that inflation makes people think shorter term. They don't build things for the long term. They trust their currency less. They trust their government less. And there's a downward spiral. And, you think about trust. Trust is everything. When no one trusted people in Singapore, that was 60 years ago, Lee Kuan Yew came, and they were making about $100 per capita per year. Lee Kuan Yew came in and he built trust one brick at a time, all the way through. And that is probably the most trustworthy country in the world now. And now their per capita income is one of the top in the entire world. Whereas India historically has been not trustworthy. It's been very corrupt at the top, and that comes all the way down. And so that not having enough trust makes it so people live for the moment. They don't live to build things of great value for the future. Africa, many countries in Africa are very corrupt and have been. And if you have corruption at the top and you're saying, I'm going to build this big business, all of a sudden the government's going to sweep in there and take it. There's no incentive to build it. So trust is really important. And when you print currency willy-nilly like that, you are undermining the trust in your currency. And I think it's dangerous. Hopefully it's V-shaped and we're all back to work and whatever, but the UN is predicting 135, in addition to domestic violence and depression and disassociation and demotivated people, we're going to get 135 million people dying of starvation just because we cut them off the supply chain. This is really a tragedy that we've created ourselves out of a tragedy that was minor. We have created a major tragedy, 135 times as bad, by locking down.
Tim, in terms of, let's talk about macroeconomics and really lean into that a little more. There's obviously quite I'm not sure how to a bumpy election coming. Last night was a bit of a fire.
My God, did you see that debate? They were down in the mud. That was crazy. I mean, I was thinking if I were Trump, I would just let the guy talk because, he's a little bit senile. I'd let Biden talk because Biden's a little senile. But instead, he went at him, and Biden probably had more neurons firing during that than he has in years. And Trump looks so awful, being so nasty and aggressive and, whatever. I'm sort of looking for the statesman. Where is our statesman or the visionary? Where's our visionary? Brock Pierce said he was going to run for president, and so let's support him. He just needs to take Montana or Wyoming. He only has to take Wyoming, one state, because if there's a deadlock between the other two, it goes to Congress, and he might just end up being the president. It was embarrassing. That debate was embarrassing.
It was wild. And I think, we've got another, low consumer spending, wages are pretty stagnant. Unemployment's coming back at a record speed, but it's still pretty high. But then on the other side, and I think this is where I think people are a bit baffled, is the stock market's at an all-time high. And it's pulled back a bit. There's a bit of uncertainty right now in trading, but I wanted to get your view on, as an investor, like, what do you make of that? How do you interpret that? And yeah, how do you play from here?
I was so wrong. I completely bailed out of the public markets well before COVID hit, because I thought, wow, these are pretty high prices. But then with COVID and when he printed the $13 trillion, that money went into the individual. The individual decided to invest it. And there was a lot of demand for stock and not much supply. And so it skyrocketed the stock market. It created amazing wealth. And I suspect that we'll have a very robust IPO market coming to follow it. But there will be a time 2 or 3 years from now, that's a little bit of the economy didn't really come back as quickly as we had hoped. Because the stock market at current prices, at least the public stocks today, are anticipating everything going perfectly. They've got to hit huge growth numbers. They got to hit huge profitability numbers to justify the crazy high valuations that they have out there. But, it makes pretty good sense that Zoom and Amazon had big booms. It doesn't necessarily make sense that some of these other companies had big booms with them. Luckily, a lot of the things in my portfolio have been have benefited from the COVID and the lockdown because a lot of it relies on remote, whether it's remote medicine or remote education or whatever. And so we have seen, real upticks in the base businesses that we've funded, but we haven't seen the valuations that the public market has been experiencing. And, when the individual investor comes into the public market, it does have a run like this. And then it does flatten out. And then there's the IPOs that follow, they backfill. And then there's a point at which people, somebody sort of says, wait a second, there's a problem here. The earnings aren't matching the valuations, and we got to, and then it comes tumbling down and the individual leaves the market and the institutions are kind of creep back in. And then it starts all over again.
So I think, and some people are saying, with this printing.
But I missed it, so I'm not sure I'm the one to talk to. I'm sure there are other people who have figured this out and made a lot of money, and they know better than I do.
I think maybe the interpretation I think that I'm interested in your view on is: do you think potentially, some of these big tech stocks are now seen not necessarily for their investment potential, but as stores of value, purely because
I think people said, look, I've got all this money. I don't want the dollar. I don't want the cash, because I realize this cash is like melting ice cream. It's dropping in value as we speak because they've printed so many of them. So let me use it to buy some of these stocks. Well, that was some of the impetus to have the stock market shoot up.
Sure.
Because before they printed that money, the stock market did take a huge dive on COVID, and it was almost for just a day or a week that went down, and then it came shooting back up.
Tim, I think another thing, it's what's right now is I think everyone's looking at the business landscape, and things have changed. I think the first question I have is from an investor perspective, looking at the landscape, how are you sort of seeing that, and how are you sort of, I guess the main question, how are you investing for the long term?
Well, I have some concerns because I did notice that I went 2 or 3 weeks straight doing about 10 Zoom calls a day. And I was starting to wonder why I do this. Because you get people on the other end of a Zoom call, but you don't get humanity on the other end of the Zoom call. And so you don't feel the people, you don't see into the spirit in their eyes and their energy and their feel the way you do in person. And so what we did was I just said, look, I'm going to start going back to the office on Tuesdays. And if other people want to come, great. If you want to stay home, that's great too. But we'll have our meetings at the office, and we can Zoom you in or whatever. It made a big difference. And I encourage other groups to do it. Facebook, just by saying, everybody can be remote for the next 2 years or whatever, or what Google said, something like that. I think that they may be losing something that way because there's something to the energy of a brainstorm where you're going back and forth about something. You don't do that on a Zoom call. There's something about like the responsibility you feel for the people around you. You don't want to let them down. That kind of goes away on a Zoom call. So I think that people really do need to go back to work. I think they need to start commuting to work, and maybe it changes. Maybe it's like 2 or 3 days a week now and not 5 days a week or 6. And and how am I looking to invest in the future? I'm probably going to do more of the same, but I do know that like VR is probably going to have a real heyday moving forward. Um, Bitcoin, crypto, I think this is going to really make people think and accelerate their interest in making this our global currency. I think that some of the big industries in the world are going through major changes, and I'm going to invest to those big industries, um, and I think that travel's going to come back. I think it's going to come back a little bit at a time. And then people are going to, but I think it'll come back with a vengeance. I think people will eventually want to travel. I think sports games, people are going to want to go to sports games again. They're going to want to go to concerts. So I think we're going to have kind of a pretty great moment when the vaccination shows up, even if it's not that effective. I think people are looking for a moment where they can get back and be human again. And that means being a part of this world economy, being an integral part of your community, of your neighborhood, of your world, of your government. And I think that's going to come. That's going to be something. Now, I am kind of looking for companies that are kind of solving mental health issues, because I'm thinking, and education, remote education, and that kind of thing, because I'm thinking, boy, the people I've talked to, they are desperate. When I went to a party recently, and there were about 40 people there, and I looked around and I thought, these people are desperate to see other people. You know, they don't care if I was their worst enemy 6 months ago. All of a sudden, I'm their best friend. They're just so happy to see a human. And I think that we really need to get back together. And if you need to wear a mask, great. But this human separation is not healthy, and that's not good for society. And definitely the lockdowns, where you say a restaurant can't do this, or a spa can't do this, or a airplane can't do this. Those are bad. Those are people killers. They kill people from starvation. And that was the UN that opened. I kind of knew that this was wrong. I wrote a tweet that said the cure may be worse than the disease, and people really beat on me for it because they really wanted to be afraid or something. But I was just saying, well, look, there are all these other effects. If you lock down these businesses, there are all these other effects. A waitress with 3 children can't afford the kids. Where she's on the street, what happens from there? What do you do? I think people didn't really think through all the repercussions, and they're coming. So there are going to be other things that are going to be affected. And I think there are going to be mass exoduses, brain drains from bad governments into good governments. I think governments are on notice. They've got to provide better service. People are looking and saying, hey, boy, this isn't working for me. This lockdown shocked my system. I thought I kind of had it all worked out. Now I'm out of here. I'm going to go start my life again somewhere else. I actually noticed that there is a woman in the back behind you who has had 2 hugs during the course of my conversation. So I love that you guys are loving each other. We all need more hugs. The Zoom made it real. It made us all realize that we just need more hugs. The only person who I think felt like this worked for her, she said, I'm an introvert, and when I'm out with a lot of people, I feel like I get sucked dry. and I have to recharge. But the extrovert benefits from seeing a lot of people and that interaction. So yeah, it's going to be different. I do think that education has got to go through a big change because the unions have controlled it for a long time, and it's been very static, and they don't even know how to teach computer science in K-12. They don't even know. In fact, they took binary math off the curriculum. And so clearly there is a need for a new form of education that is not union driven. And that's probably going to happen. There are going to be a lot of really interesting things that come from this. And I can project all I want, but it's really going to be a few entrepreneurs that come into my office that really change everything.
Tim, I'm going to...
if you're one of those great entrepreneurs and you have a business plan that's conditional, then I'm tim@draper.vc. Send me your business plan. But if you put me on some weird list, you'll be in my spam block. But if you are an entrepreneur, I want to hear from you. So we need you. If you're an entrepreneur, we need you. Get us out of this thing. Get us a vaccine so everybody can relax. Get us some immunity from the media so that we don't live in fear. Get us some immunity from the politicians who are grandstanding, trying to build their bases by scaring the heck out of everybody. Do something to make us free again.
I love it.
And then I'll fund you.
That's a great call out. I wanted to, I think that's a great, punctuation point as well to sort of wrap up. I do have one final question, Tim, that I ask everyone, and we make this collection every, and I think this year, it's a mystery to me. It's becoming grayer and foggier. I think everyone who's watching as well. But do you have a price in US dollars for Bitcoin in terms of New Year's Eve 2020? We've got very interesting trading going on right now. All sorts of international, geopolitical changes, central government changes, all those kinds of things. Would love to hear your final closing remarks on Bitcoin and where you think we might be.
So there are a lot of hedge funds that are moving the price up and down pretty actively. So it could be anywhere in a range. It's the reason I'm projecting out more than just a year or 6 months or year and a half or whatever, is that I have a much better sense for what it's going to look like in 2022 or 2023, where it's going to be around 250,000, maybe higher. But I don't have a very clear view of what's going to happen between now and then. I suspect generally it's going up, but I don't project sort of in the midpoints. I just sort of say, well, look, when it was in 2014, I said it's going to be 10,000 in 2017, and I hit it right on the number. Well, now I realize that it has to go through its machinations. The engineers have to do all their work, and then it'll find its sweet spot, and then it's going to be, crazy valuable. But I can't even I'd be picking a number completely out of the air. but 250K at the end of 2022 or beginning of 2023, that you can just bank on.
Awesome stuff.
Tim, thank you so much. And obviously, no financial advice. That was just an opinion from Tim, obviously.
Yeah, no, that's just...
Yeah.
That's what I'm going to bank on. I'm not giving you any advice.
No advice at all.
Don't take my advice. Think of what I did. I got out of the stock market before the big boom. So don't listen to me.
Don't listen. I agree. We just wanted to make sure everyone knows that. Tim, thank you so much for joining us on the Daily Exchange. And obviously, you've got your LinkedIn, Twitter that do follow Tim there. He's very active. And thank you again for joining us.
It's at Tim Draper for Twitter, and LinkedIn, it's at Timothy Draper.
Thank you so much. All right, guys, that is the Daily Exchange. Tim Draper predicting the 250K 2023. We'll see you guys. Do subscribe, do follow us. Yeah!
All right, Fred, good job.